Hello viewers, Tim Poole here with the Huddle, and I'm with Ciara Nic Liam, MD of Gaming of Entain. Ciara, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tell us and tell our viewers about your day-to-day role. What are your duties? What are the kind of things you do?
Yeah, so I work in the product and technology department at Entain. So we cover everything from the content that we get for all of our brands and our players. I look after our in-house studios as well. And then the core product and tech side of it. So building all the features on our website, making sure our proprietary bingo and poker platforms, that they work, that they load fast, that they work, and that they, customers enjoy playing with us.
Definitely want to talk to you a little bit later about the in-house studios. In terms of the obviously we're at the start of 2026. You'll have a roadmap for the year, I'm assuming. In terms of strategy, what are the kind of pillars for you guys?
So I think for me, when we break it down, it's not dissimilar to how I talk about our business. But the first one is content. And if I was to say anything when we tried to write our strategy, it's that I don't want content to be a conversation anymore, or content without compromise. And that's because when we integrate all of our providers centrally and we make them available in each of the markets and we ensure that free spins and jackpots and everything work, I want my team to do all of that work in the background, and for a brand or one of our markets to just say, oh, I need this games, and us to be able to enable it for them really quickly. I don't want them to have to wait months for it to go through our integration pipeline and testing and regulatory stuff. So we've done an awful lot of work on the tech side to make sure that how we do our content integrations and how we provide our content is as fast as it can be for each of those markets. But then also just using a data-led approach to content. So understanding what content is working in each market, and not waiting for people to come and say, I need these games because I can't operate in Spain or Brazil or New Jersey without them, but knowing that, being on the front foot and just saying, no problem, we can get those configured and enabled for you next week.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the UK autumn budget, obviously remote gaming duty is going to increase from April. It might be a little early for kind of an impact on strategy, but has that had any bearing on the content strategy that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think from a content perspective, we're really going to wait and see what happens for now. Obviously, we've sat down with our content procurement team. We're understanding where down that supply chain the tax will be passed on and what savings we could make. And we have an obligation to our shareholders as well to make sure the business remains profitable. But we're not making decisions like dropping our RTP for customers or anything just yet, which I think a lot of the smaller brands have maybe done already. We want to try and weather this where we can and make sure that, we're not just putting it straight onto the player.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the in-house studios, and as I said, I was keen to talk about it. What are the pros and cons when it comes to making your own content? Because obviously you work with some big suppliers as well. For example, Pragmatic Play with the fishing slot. That we did a video. We went to a shop in Farringdon, a Ladbroke shop. So in terms of, you've got these big suppliers who can create these fantastic games, but you can make your own games as well. Yeah, what are the kind of pros and cons?
Well, I guess for me, the biggest pro of our in-house studio is Pragmatic doesn't build land-based titles. So we license that IP from them, and our in-house studio actually built that game onto our cabinets in retail. So that's what gives us our strategic advantage. For me personally, I think I love just the variety. When I talk about leading a product and technology function at Entain, I've got musicians in Manchester and mathematicians in India and people all over the world. And I love that it can bring that just different into the day-to-day and that creative element to it as well. But I think, for us, it's really about data. So we understand the trends. We can see what's happening with each of our players. So that gives the studio the advantage. But then from the brand's perspective, it gives them that unique advantage in the market. So games that you can't play anywhere else. And a lot of people say, is studios a vanity project? Everyone has one, everyone wants to do it. But we don't promote our studio games just because they're in-house games. For us, it's about making sure that we build on our exclusive advantage with studios, not just being reliant on people like Pragmatic or other third-party providers. And then the content has to earn its place, because if studios build a game and it doesn't perform, then we're not going to promote it. We're not going to push it on the homepage at the cost of a better game. So they've got the player data. They've got the depth of analytics. We have access to customer testing as well. So we will often show customers concepts before we build them. So that first, and then the scale, because if, while we know that reskins don't work, for example, you can see early emerging trends and you can say, okay, this has worked in the UK. Maybe markets like Greece or Ontario would be good markets to try a derivative of this game rather than just reskinning it in every market.
I found it quite interesting that you said one of your points was that if you've made a game and it's not performing as well, you wouldn't necessarily sacrifice, a third-party game that's doing better. So it's not necessarily a competition with suppliers. It's more, as you say, for example, the pragmatic example, you work together with the in-house studio.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done it the other way as well, where the IP from one of our in-house studio games, Well, we took that and we partnered with Playtech to build Well Live, which is our live casino game studio. So, I think the studios do compete in that their games need to be as good as or better than the content coming through from our third-party providers. We get the benefit of not paying rev share on it, but they're not assessed just on how much we save versus working with our partners. They're essentially assessed on how good their games are. So when we look at last year, one of the key results that we measured in my organization in gaming was whether, we call them consistent bangers, but whether one of our in-house studios performed in the top 5 launches for each of our core markets at Entain. And that's a big ask. Some of our brands are launching 100-200 games every month. So to have a game in the top 5 is a big ask, but that's how we judged our studio performance.
You said the words live casino, and it's live casino studio, and it took me over to that as a topic straight away in my head. There seems to be maybe a time of potential change at the moment, or certainly innovation, or certainly suppliers and companies attempting to innovate. We've got some operators with AI, completely AI avatars. We've got others with video realism instead of human dealers. Really interested in your take as an operator. Where do you see this live casino kind of market going at the moment?
Yeah, so live casino is something I've always worked in. I've been, working with each of the kind of core big providers since they were very early on in their days. And I've gone out, I've built big studios. I know the cost involved, especially when we're facing tax hikes in the UK. I really take a product-centric approach to things. So rather than just assessing the products, I try to understand the problem they're trying to solve. So, I'm really interested in Spain, for example, where they think they might be able to get AI live blackjack through, where live blackjack is not regulated in Spain because it's not actually a live casino the way it's regulated. It's more of a streamed RNG type blackjack. And that solves a core problem we have in that market, which makes me really interested in it. But I've learned, I bet quite a lot. I love to play new games. I like to play live casino. I like to play blackjack in a casino as well when I get the chance. And while I don't think I would be particularly interested in the product, I've learned that just because I'm not interested, when you have the millions of players that we have at Entain all around the world on our multiple different brands, different things appeal to different people all the time. So I think we're probably not at the stage where it would replace our traditional live casino products right now. But it is something we will offer to the brands and make available and start to test customer interest in it. And, very much, with some of the projects we're working on this year, it is about appealing to the next generation of players coming in. And while AI generated humans, which we've not seen fully yet because it's hard to get the hands right, and I think that deprecates trust. But the next generation of players coming through have grown up in that PlayStation era, trying to customize their avatars. I'm really interested in things like dialects as well. And, sometimes people need subtitles when I talk with my Irish accent, but, just having dealers that you can resonate with. Personally, I think the reason live casino works so well is you have trust with players because you see a human spin it and it's less likely to be rigged. And that's why they don't play RNG blackjack. AI dealers remove some of that element, but where it solves problems in markets like Spain, like with having Portuguese, like Brazilian Portuguese speakers in Brazil, if it can remove the requirement for local hosting in some states in the US, depending on the requirements and compliance angles, then that's all very interesting for us. And like I said, that next generation of players coming through, we have an obligation at Entain to make sure we're offering products that continue to appeal to them.
Speaking to a few kind of live casino studios recently, I think that those 3 examples you just mentioned kind of hit the nail on the head on some of the pain points they're trying to solve.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about AI generally. And from your previous answer, I kind of surmised that, it's a common view. It's at a certain stage, but it's not quite at the stage yet where, as you say, you could have a whole AI dealer. Well, I suppose you can have an AI dealer, but whether it's perfect or not, that's maybe not the stage we're at.
Exactly. And I think, I go back to, you could have holograph dealers a while ago when they built 3D studios and it never really caught on. But AI for us at Entain is really important, actually. And I run a product and technology space. I think while customers might not want an AI generated dealer with glitchy hands or fingers that don't quite match up touching cards, they're not as worried about whether or not you're using automation in your testing cycles before you deploy software. Or they're not so worried about where your core code is coming if it means your sites load faster, performs better, there's less problems for customers. If your games are no longer crashing because you have automated cycles, as you start to bring hundreds of thousands of game variants through every month, then customers won't mind that. And that's it. For us, we're being really deliberate about AI at Entain. So if it makes the experience better, if it makes our work faster, if it improves quality, then we're all for it. But if it's just something for the sake of it, then that's not anything I've got interest in my teams working on. I want them to experiment and test and learn and get fluent in using it, and that to be one of their core pieces. But also, I'm quite lucky in Entain. I like working for big companies where there's a framework where people can play within. And I think freedom within that framework is really important. And I think maybe some of the smaller companies I've spoken to, they haven't gotten that quite right because their staff are using free tools, there's privacy, security concerns. And thankfully, we've solved a lot of that at Entain.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm currently reading a book on generative AI and all this. But when it comes to, I think generally there's been a bit of pushback. And as you say, I think it's because of things like trust, as you mentioned. But within gaming, certainly, again, as you mentioned in the background, technologically, I would say, well, from people I've spoken to here on the Huddle, in 2025, it was quite a breakthrough year in terms of now the use of AI, as you say, in the back end, in kind of automated processes is year on year, it's really shot up, I would say.
Yeah, and just how far it's come, some of my engineering director, when he reviewed some of the capabilities and tools out there just 12 months ago, he said, it's all hype about it replacing jobs and doing different pieces because it's not actually that good. And just watching how far it's come in 12 months, where now, obviously it depends on the quality of your inputs. And we do a lot of things like making sure that we have prompt libraries, we're sharing best practice, we're really highlighting things that go well. Yeah. But actually, making sure that you can use it properly is quite important as well, because I think the quality of anything that comes out, whether it's a marketing agency, whether it's AI, whether it's new staff that join your company, is all dependent on the quality of what you put in.
Yeah. For a final topic, and it's last but not least, I've left it last because it's, arguably the most important, responsible gaming, kind of sustainability, but RG primarily. It ties in with kind of the AI discussion. It ties in with the content discussion. In terms of how you might be implementing RG, or most likely already are, within your content strategy, what kind of examples can you give of well, I guess, practical implications, and whether it's AI or not?
Yeah, I think, look, responsible gaming is really important to us at Entain, and it's not just something on our backlog. So responsible gaming is never a feature on one of our backlogs. It's almost a design principle that runs throughout the entire thing, and it's a culture that we have at Entain. So that's quite important to us. So our studios will have a responsible design policy. I know we sat down just last week as we start a new year. We've had some new starters. We're growing our studio team just to refresh that in everyone's memory. It's important to build great games that people love to play, but you have a responsibility to make sure it's designed in the right way. Likewise, our UX team is just kicking off a new project for one of our brands that hopefully we'll be able to talk about soon on redesign. And again, reminding them about, best practice and where we go and our obligation, and just making sure people understand why we're doing what we're doing and the impact that it can have on people is really important. So, everyone doing all of their internal compliance training and everything. But, aside from that, there are whole teams at Entain who look at it, but we never say that's somebody else's job. Everyone has an obligation to make sure that we do things the right way. And that comes from Stella, our CEO, right the way down. We don't say that's something that sits with Simon, our general counsel, for example, or the compliance teams. everyone sees it the whole way through the organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly positive to hear. I interviewed the Gambling Commission CEO, who's in fact on the cover of our magazine, and he did say, there are maybe some pain points that at certain areas of the industry, but overall within the last few years, this is coming from the regulator in the UK. He said that overall compliance has really improved. So I think that's if the regulator's saying it, not just the licensees. I think it's a fair point, and it really has gone a long way.
Yeah, and I don't think like I said, when we think about responsible gambling and compliance as a design principle rather than a feature. So when we had changes in the UK last year, where we had to make €5 caps and £2 and £5 caps on people's bets, we gave that as a problem statement to one of our product managers, and we challenged them to build the best journey out there. So rather than if you try and bet for £7 or £10 and you get an error message, we talked about how we weave that narrative through the customer journey, what soft landing error messages look like, how we guide them to find out more information on it. So we've turned what is traditionally seen years ago as another compliance requirement that's come in into a way to differentiate ourselves with positive customer journeys around that. So again, we use that design principle of the requirements, but we built features on top that really did it. And it was difficult. When you deal with, we've got over 15,000 games in our global library and 200 different suppliers and counting every time we come to a show or a day like this, mapping all of their error messages and then centralizing the messages. So, they could have 130 error codes, and putting human language on top is not a small undertaking.
No.
But those are the things that customers remember. Customers will always remember how you made them feel. And that emotive side of it. And when something goes wrong or your bet is rejected, what you said to them and how you said it is actually incredibly important. And while people talk about retention and marketing campaigns and content and exciting stuff, some of those core product journeys are just as important.
Yeah, that's a very detailed approach. But as you say, it's entertainment. We're selling an experience.
Yeah.
The industry is selling an experience. And as you say, that's a very important part of it.
Yeah. You could have the best food in the world in a restaurant, but if the service is bad, you're not going back.
Yeah. You're reminding me of a couple of places we've been to this week, but for they were nice restaurants.
Good food,
yeah,
hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But Ciara, thanks very much for your time. Been a pleasure speaking with you, and best of luck for 2026.
Likewise, thank you very much. Pleasure.